Okay, thank you. Thanks for inviting us. I'm just going to try and share my screen now, hopefully.
That's coming now.
I know it takes a little while just to sort of load up. You let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it now, but it's one of the later slides, I think.
Are you on slide 2?
Possibly, yeah.
It's an introduction, so I'll scoot through because I'm mindful of time. So thank you for inviting me to take part today and to present. So my name's Hazel Kendall. I work for an organisation called the Westcountry Rivers Trust. We're based down in Cornwall, and our area covers pretty much up to about Bristol and up to Wessex, where we join other rivers trusts. So we're an environmental charity. We're one of approximately 60 regional rivers trusts around England and Wales, and now in Ireland as well. So yeah, we're an environmental charity, and the Westcountry Rivers Trust has been going for 26 years. So we're kind of one of the older ones, and we have quite a large patch that we cover. And as a result of that, we're quite a large organisation now. We have over 50 staff. I've been there for a number of years, certainly over 12 years, and we've grown. But our teams are pretty much split into 3 operational teams, which cover land, river management, you know, trying to improve water quality, but also the wider environment. So our teams, I've tried to illustrate here through these photos very simply, but we have teams that cover fisheries and habitat works. So it's habitat management. So those skills are in-house. We have a land team who work with farmers. So they're qualified farm advisors. And we have evidence and engagement and education team, and they also work with a lot of data. So between us, we work across the teams to deliver projects. Our remit is all about protecting and enhancing our water courses, our streams, our lakes, our rivers, but also the land, because it's very important to point out that what happens in the river is a reflection of what happens on the land. So we've got a lot of experience, and coming back to David's point about skills, very important to bring those skills coming through within our teams. Just trying to move on. It's not letting me move on to, it's not letting me move on my screen.
You might again need to click bottom left on the image. There's sometimes an arrow pointing.
There we go. It's all right. There was no button. It was no obvious thing.
Yeah.
So this image is one that we created and have used quite a lot. So anybody in the industry have probably seen it several times. But our project work is always there. It's aiming to deliver catchment scale projects wherever possible. So trying to do it across a broad area and to deliver maximum benefit from that. This image, as I say, we created a while ago. Started with basically I just did a pencil sketch, and then we sort of built on it from there. And what it's trying to do is, bearing in mind we're in the southwest, it's a very rural area. We're talking about land management as well as water management. So this image tries to illustrate in quite a simple way to portray to people about how you can move to best practice, moving from the image on the left-hand side of the riverbank to the right-hand side. So how can you change practice on farms to improve water quality and improve the environment? And it's how you build in those steps. So you're looking at, you know, you're working with nature, not against nature. And we use this image in the upstream thinking project that we have been working with Southwest Water, for example, for a number of years now. We're just now in the 3rd 5-year round of that project's funding. We're one of several partners that help deliver that locally. It's all, again, it's about improving water quality, but the additional benefits that come from that. When you were asking about barriers, So there are numerous, obviously, but just to try and highlight some of those. Some of the barriers that we have is, as an environmental charity, we have no core funding. So when we develop projects and they're delivering those projects, they might be restricted funding, that they can only deliver actions in a certain area for a certain period of time. So it means that we don't have the luxury, if you like, to be able to just talk to anybody in the Southwest to say, we can deliver this project in this area, because it may not be possible. We can help, but it may not be that that project is active in that area. When you do run a project, projects can be very short turnaround, but they can be a couple of years. If you're working in a new area, it takes a reasonable amount of time to gain traction on the ground, to engage with all the right people that you need to speak to, particularly if it's a new area. And you can be, particularly working with landowners, you can be a couple of years into a project before you really get their interest and their support, because it's a new thing. And if your project only runs for 2.5 or 3 years and it's taken 2 years to get their attention, then obviously that's a bit of an issue. And the other thing is, working on a catchment scale, water quality is one of our main drivers, can be quite a big issue. And the impact of your work is quite a big scale of a problem to deal with. So if you've seen recent reports that were issued about the state of our rivers in the UK, when you look at it in the context of Water Framework Directive standards, something like 15% of the UK rivers meet good status, but the new levels of assessing them on a chemical status means that none of the rivers meet that standard. So it's a big problem to deal with. This slide illustrates some of the work we were doing with the catchment-based approach, where we were getting to talk to a number of different stakeholders, including local authorities. But one of the barriers we found is that, particularly in large organisations such as a local authority, it's very hard to identify the right person to speak to, and for them to understand what we were doing in context of how it was of interest to them. So it's almost like you're talking a different language, and you do come across individuals that have a single focus of an output, and they can't put your work into context. So it's often referred to as silo thinking, but it basically means they're only interested in one outcome. And it takes a little bit of time to sort of adjust that understanding, I suppose. So through hosting that catchment partnership, we looked at, this is back in 2011, 2012, and we aimed to deliver improvements in water quality and water supply and wider environmental conditions by consulting with local stakeholders. So this allowed us to demonstrate how to achieve much more through collaboration and with input at a local level and across a range of interests. So you need to talk to people, you need to understand what they're interested in, and you need to work out how you can then join up your next steps. So that's what we did. So we used a series of meetings, and we used lots of available data to sort of carry out an assessment with the steer of those input from different groups. And it allowed us to create some mapping, which is a really useful tool because it's very visual and people tend to understand that. So that was a really good thing to do. So we were trying to pull together, what's already happening, what is about to happen, what do you want to get from that, how can we achieve that? And we set this out by splitting it into focus for different levels of data to look at water quality, water supply, biodiversity, habitats and species, carbon potential, but also other things, in terms of community for things like flood risk mitigation and recreational access. So we put all that together, and then if you layer it up, you end up with the map that was on the right-hand side there. And that shows you the darker areas, show you areas where they provide multiple benefits. So if you're carrying out activity, we asked ourselves the question, if somebody were to magic up £1 million of money, what would you spend that on and where and why? Well, you'd spend it where you get the most efficiency and you get the most results. It's multi-benefits. So that's what we did really. So in terms of making it easier, it would be useful to I guess understand, if you're working across sectors, to get to speak the same language, find some common ground to speak the same language. Obviously, we're in a very rural area in the southwest, but you know, this is transferable to urban areas. One of my colleagues, Nick, has done some work looking at urban areas as a focus. So it's, you know, it's dealing with similar but slightly different issues. And created this image as well that's looking to compare, a bit like the one before that was looking at a rural landscape. This is looking at a very built up landscape, but areas that are greener. But again, it's applying different tools. So you're looking at sustainable urban drainage. You're looking at reducing like sheer runoff in heavy rainfall events, flooding. You're trying to reduce the pollution that's mobilized. You're also improving access to green space. You know, it's about people's health and well-being. And the point David raised before about people living in sort of greener landscapes and the benefits that come from that. So in trying to quantify some of those benefits, all of our projects to some degree require reporting, but also you should be monitoring and evaluating that as you go through a project to make sure that you're clear about if you're doing the best you can you improve it, how can you improve it? Some of the projects we have carried out specific economic evaluation. So a few years ago, there was a series of projects called the catchment restoration projects. We ran 5 across the southwest. These ran up to about 2015. So figures are slightly old, but you can put them into context. And they were using investment to carry out improvements in a catchment to improve water quality because it was failing for Water Framework Directive status. So then we were working with landowners to make improvements. And there was an independent evaluation report, an economic report carried out towards the end of that, and it looked at the return on investment, and it stated that by improving water quality and ecological conditions in those catchments, it generated substantial social benefits and a range of ecosystem service provisions. And across those 5 projects, for every £1 invested, it generated between 1.9 and 4.5 pounds generated in return. So it demonstrates that the investment is, you know, it's broadening out there in that area. And also to say that the upstream thinking project, again, we've evaluated work on that. There's a report that's literally just come out now, which looks back on the last 5-year round. And that's a significant amount of investment. So what it does is it proactively invests into the catchment, and the work that we do with landowners, where we provide them with any grant funding support, they match that with their own investment. So if we are spending, you know, a couple of £100,000 of investment there in grants, the farmers more than meet that. And that's also going into the local economy, because if it's going into supporting their business, it's filtering out into the local contractors, suppliers, local community, you know, and that's a really important point, and particularly so at the moment in terms of green recovery. One of the other things we've done more recently is expand our work by linking into other sectors, and I've been doing a piece of work in the Tamar with a group of companies who are a business board and the business sector. These companies have direct and indirect interests in that catchment, because their producers are feeding into their supply chains. So it's in their interest to make sure that their businesses and their suppliers can continue to trade and make sure that's sustainable. So we're working with them to provide advice and support, working with their producers for best practice on farms. And it helps them meet that sustainable future. It helps make the catchment more resilient in the face of, you know, changing economy, but also, you know, in the face of having to adapt to climate change, for example. So they all rely on the natural environment.
Hazel, could I just check? Do you have many more comments to make? Just very much aware of time and letting questions.
I have 2 more slides quickly. So we are one of 4, the map in the middle is we are one of 4 pilots in the UK on that, and it's linked to a national group called the Courtauld Group, which is a group of brands and retailers. So very quickly then. So one of the activities we did was through them is to generate some investment money, which we offered out to farmers, which included one of the companies donating money for woodland planting as a carbon offset. So that generated 16,000 trees. They provided the trees, we identified the landowners, and we offered those out. So that got done. And another big part of the work is we are expanding our soil carbon work in terms of, we've been doing this since 2015 and researching so that we can quantify what a healthy soil provides in terms of carbon sequestration. So it's not just healthy soils supporting agriculture, it also supports a number of different things, including mitigating flood risk, including carbon sequestration and biodiversity. So we're expanding what that looks like, and if that provides opportunities to match up in, you know, potential interest from investors, but also how you manage the land in a more sustainable way to do that. So does that provide potential market opportunities for companies, but also for the landowners? So that's something we can quantify. And the last slide is just to say, in terms of health outputs and benefits, it's all the things that David mentioned before. It's well documented, and the report on the screen is one that my colleague worked on, which was in Manchester, and it aims to quantify some of that in terms of understanding, you know, health and well-being, access to nature, community engagement, community participation, and education. So, you know, to sum up, really, basically, it's about how can you join those interests together to make sure that you're very efficient and effective with any available funding so that you can bring all those interests together.
Great, thank you, Hazel.
Sorry, I didn't go over.
Yeah. So yeah, moving quickly on to the questions. So question from Sarah Gray: do you have any clues from central government regarding new farm subsidies post-EU? Will these benefit our rivers?
Well, we hope so, but the new ELM scheme, the environmental land management schemes, are at the moment in test and trial stages. The new scheme, I believe, is not going to come in until 2024. There's a lot of conversation around it. We hope, yes, they will, but it's still too early to know exactly what exactly is happening with it.
Thank you.
Okay, there was another question about there apparently being some conflict between planting rivers on tree banks, sorry, planting trees on riverbanks, and the EA not wanting that, and how you deal with that sort of conflict.
Well, we're not necessarily planting on riverbanks, so any woodland planting that we've been doing within our team, we've got some qualified, you know, ARB qualified guys who you know, have the experience and the qualification to be able to do an assessment. So any woodland planting is assessed for making sure it's in the right place, and again, it's the right tree in the right place, not just trees for the sake of trees. So if you are planting in a riparian zone, it's not so much planting right on the riverbank, it would probably be further back. But we do obviously work closely with the Environment Agency or Natural England, etc., where there's any conditions we need to make sure that we adhere to make sure that you're doing this optimally and that you're not wasting your time or ending up with a negative output.
Okay, and could you just quickly say something about how local authorities have been involved in this kind of thing, or how they can support this kind of work?
Sure. So we've spoken to some of our local authorities and variously across some of our projects. I've been more recently dealing with some contacts from Cornwall Council, and they have a sustainability team, I know. They also have, they've already started, not just an ambition for a forest for Cornwall, and we're talking to them about how we can again align that, but also in West Devon and certainly in other parts of Devon that heading in towards Somerset. We've been variously working with different authorities. In Somerset, for example, we've been doing more urban focus for sustainable urban drainage. So it's about linking up with them and understanding again how we can overlap. I mean, there's a lot of, the phrase at the moment is blended finance, and it basically just means getting people together to talk to each other and understand what finance you have available and how can you be more effective with what you have by working together. And that's, you know, that's the work that we've been doing with, you know, public sector, private sector, that's exactly what that is really. So that it's a way to evaluate it and work out how's the best way to proceed really.
Great, thank you.